Hello everyone, this is ARIRANG News. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul and I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. We begin with another hint that the U.S. might be mulling over deploying its missile defense system called THAAD to South Korea. To defense officials in Washington, the top U.S. military general in South Korea emphasized the importance of having a layered ballistic missile defense capability in the South. Hyun-bin starts us off.
The commander of U.S. Forces Korea is calling on Seoul and Washington to implement a layered ballistic missile defense capability, and another strong signal that the U.S. is keen to deploy the THAAD system to the Korean peninsula. In a written testimony to the U.S. House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense on Thursday, General Curtis Scaparrotti stressed the need for a ballistic missile defense capability in South Korea due to the threat posed by North Korea. On the same day, an official from the U.S. Defense Department said Washington is prepared to hold official talks with Seoul about the possible deployment of THAAD, as there have been no formal consultations thus far. The ongoing speculation about the possible deployment of THAAD to South Korea has stirred controversy inside and outside of Korea. China and Russia are deeply opposed to THAAD being on their regional doorstep, saying it would infringe upon their national security. On the other hand, its supporters say THAAD will counter North Korea's increasing ballistic and missile threats. The U.S. also believes the threat posed by North Korea has become even more acute. Scaparrotti says that Pyongyang has the ability to produce a miniaturized nuclear warhead that can be mounted on top of a ballistic missile. North Korea has conducted 3 nuclear bomb tests, the first in 2006, the second in 2009, and the most recent coming in February 2013. Experts predict the potential fourth testing will be to test a miniaturized warhead. Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And speaking of nuclear warheads, a nuclear expert in the U.S. maintains that North Korea could have up to 100 nuclear weapons by the year 2020. Defending his original claim, Joel Witt, an analyst for the North Korea monitoring website 38 North, said his theory was not beyond the realm of possibility. Witt added that U.S. scientists have long known the North is able to produce weapons-grade plutonium at its main nuclear plant. However, the U.S. analyst questioned South Korea's assessment that North Korea currently has 16 warheads, saying the estimation was based on assumptions only. The South Korean government has come out with an optimistic response to North Korea's unilateral wage hike for its workers at the Inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Friday that the government is willing to raise wages for workers in the complex within the 5% range as stipulated in labor regulations for the complex. Last month, Pyongyang unilaterally decided to raise its workers' wages to $74 per month and revise regulations at the complex. This comes after a group of South Korean businessmen traveled to Kaesong for wage talks with North Korean officials this week. The top diplomats of South Korea, Japan, and China will hold their first trilateral talks in 3 years in Seoul tomorrow. Korea's foreign ministry says the visiting ministers will hold separate bilateral talks with Foreign Minister Yoon ahead of the three-way meeting and pay courtesy visits to President Park Geun-hye. Topping the agenda will be talks on restoring cooperation among the three nations, and attention is on whether Saturday's meeting will lead to a three-way summit in the near future. That summit had been stalled mainly due to the territorial disputes between Japan and China over the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, known in China as Diaoyu. The chairman of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee pledged his commitment to, quote, getting the historical record correct regarding Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women. In a statement, Representative Ed Royce says he told a group of visiting South Korean lawmakers about his trip to a memorial set up in Glendale, Los Angeles to honor the so-called comfort women. The statement also mentioned that the Korean lawmakers told Royce that it is not appropriate for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to address the U.S. Congress without sincerely apologizing for Tokyo's wartime atrocities. On this, the U.S. lawmaker reportedly said nothing has been decided yet. The Japanese leader is set to visit Washington next month amid mounting calls by the international community to sincerely apologize. The Korean government plans to spend an extra 10 trillion won or $9 billion to boost the sluggish economy. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan says 3 trillion won or roughly $2.7 billion will be spent in the first half of this year, with the remainder in the latter half. He said this is necessary to grow public investment due to weak consumer demand triggered by low consumption. Choi said the economy is showing signs of improvement, but the government needed to do more than the previous plan to spend less than $5 billion in the first half. Following a recent series of graft cases, the Korean government is stepping up efforts to root out corruption. During a joint meeting on Friday, officials from the prosecution, the police, and government regulatory agencies worked together to develop effective anti-corruption measures. The prosecution plans to monitor corporate slush funds and graft cases related to state-financed development projects. Cyber attacks and personal data leaks are high priorities for the police, while the nation's financial institutions will strengthen oversight on tax evasion and stock manipulation. However, Minister for Government Policy Coordination Chu Kyung-ho advised that normal business activities should not be disrupted in the process of reducing corruption. Now, after the U.S. Federal Reserve's monetary meeting this week, the Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol says external economic uncertainties may have grown, but he adds because the Fed seems to be planning on raising the rate gradually, the spillover effects will be limited. Shin Se-min reports.
Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol says that the pace of the rate increase by the U.S. Federal Reserve is more crucial than when it starts. During a meeting with local commercial bankers on Friday, the governor said that although the timing of the rate hike is important, he said more attention will be on the pace of the increase, as it will continue to rise once it starts. The top central banker's comment follows the Fed's latest indication that it's open to a possible interest rate rise on the back of improving jobs growth, moving it a step closer to increasing the rate for the first time in 9 years. Regarding this, the central banker said economic uncertainty in Korea still exists, adding that it is difficult to predict when the Fed will begin to raise its rates. The BOK last week cut the country's interest rate to a historic low of 1.75% to help boost a sluggish Korean economy. Some experts in Korea believe the country will maintain its key expansionary policy for now because tightening moves like a rate increase by the Fed also indicate possible changes in the global financial market. A U.S. rate hike could trigger a major capital outflow from Korea, as investment already made in developing economies could flow into the U.S. market, eventually forcing the BOK to raise the rate. Experts here say that major economies like Europe and Japan, with their continued monetary easing measures, should work as a buffer for the Korean economy, even if a sizable amount of money makes its way to the U.S. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Market watchers expect Samsung Electronics to sell over 50 million units of its latest Galaxy S series smartphones this year. Global market analysis provider DRAM Exchange says it has raised its 2015 sales outlook for the Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge by 20% from its earlier forecast. It expects Samsung to sell 22 million Galaxy S6 units in the second quarter of the year alone. That's 5 million more than its previous estimate. It also projects quarterly sales to well exceed 10 million in each of the final 2 quarters of the year. Samsung debuted its Galaxy S6 series at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona early this month, with ambitions to regain its lead in the global smartphone market over its rival, Apple. Now, in these times of slowing growth and low inflation, some of the businesses in developed economies are raising salaries. This could boost consumption and lead growth, but will South Korea follow suit? Song Ji-sun has the story.
Korea's minimum wage has been rising at a pace of 7% over the past 2 years, but opposition parties claim the pace of the hike should be over 10% to reach at least $9 per hour. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-won has been calling on corporations to raise salaries as higher income boosts consumption, leading growth. In the US and Japan, as their paychecks will be bigger than last year. Walmart last month announced that it will raise its hourly pay to $9 per hour, and other distribution companies like Target and Marshalls have also followed suit. Japanese automakers enjoying a sales hike from the weekend are also raising salaries for their employees, some for the first time in over a dozen years. Nissan, Toyota, and Honda have increased their monthly basic salaries to between $30 and $40. Germany and the UK have raised their minimum wage this year, and many European countries have a minimum wage that's double that of Seoul's. Meeting with business leaders last week, the finance minister urged companies to consider raising salaries, but business leaders were reluctant to follow, saying that could weaken their competitiveness. Che has also scaled back, saying corporate salary is an issue negotiated between labor and management. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
A growing number of Korea's urban dwellers are leaving the city behind and returning to the farm. The nation's agriculture ministry says 44,000 households relocated to rural areas last year, jumping nearly 40% from the year before. One of the reasons cited for the record high figure was poor job security for young people. The trend first made a big surge in 2010, and the government expects it will continue in the future following projections of increased life expectancy for Korea's expanding senior population. As with most tech gadgets, surveillance cameras are becoming smarter. They used to simply record what's happening, but now some of them can prevent accidents and even catch intruders. Kim Ji-yeon has the story.
An employee starts to walk around with no safety mask or safety gear on. The potentially hazardous situation is detected by a state-of-the-art camera and instantly relayed to a safety administrator. This smart video management system, or SVMS, developed by Samsung S1, has the ability to preemptively detect dangerous situations.
We film a site for a month and find a pattern to determine unsafe conditions based on the camera's 14 algorithms. There are 6 more categories for various industries. The system can detect and send warning signs to the administrators, allowing a swift response.
The SVMS uses a facial recognition program for intruders or to locate a particular person in a designated area. By calculating the speed and angle of movements, the system can detect violent acts or someone has lost consciousness. It can also figure out if barrels containing hazardous material are in danger of tipping over by calculating their angle. This system changes the dynamics of CCTVs, merely used for recording stuff that has already happened. It's also a major improvement as it cuts down on human error. Previously, an administrator had to monitor multiple screens at all times, and the success rate of detecting an accident drops by around half if a person monitors multiple screens for more than 10 minutes. The rate drops even more drastically after just 20 minutes. Due to this, the government is investing $6.3 million over the next 5 years on these smart surveillance systems. And to address concerns about privacy, security companies have come up with features to protect identities of those caught on camera. Samsung S1 blurs the faces when they're filming and reveals them only when they're legally required to do so. There are an estimated 2.7 million CCTV cameras currently installed in Korea, including those managed by government agencies and those owned by individuals. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
The bodies from a fatal helicopter crash last week have been found. The chopper is believed to have crashed into the sea because of a lack of visibility with bad weather conditions, but the exact cause is still under investigation. Connie Kim reports.
The bodies of the two missing pilots from last week's helicopter crash have been found in waters off Korea's southwestern coast. The Coast Guard confirmed on Friday that the bodies are those of the captains of the ill-fated chopper. The Coast Guard helicopter carrying 4 people crashed in waters off Kagodo Island last Friday while trying to land near a seawall. 1 person is still missing. Last week, the helicopter was on a mission to transport an emergency patient to an inland hospital. This is the same helicopter that was the first to arrive at the Seoul ferry accident last April, saving 12 people. Korea's Coast Guard and Navy were immediately dispatched to the site, but strong waves and heavy fog have been hampering rescue operations for days. Due to the unfavorable weather conditions, it took rescue teams 6 days to find the fuselage using an underwater camera. Salvage teams recovered the fuselage roughly a kilometer from the port. However, with no black box in the helicopter, it's making it difficult for officials to find out what happened in the moments before the accident. Authorities say the pilots were caught out by a lack of visibility amid foggy conditions. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And in other parts of the world, the Islamic State group claims it was behind the massacre at Tunisia's National Museum, but there are some security analysts in the region who are skeptical and wonder if the group is taking credit for the work of a sympathizer. Kwon So-ah has more on the progress of the investigations.
The first drop of rain is how the Islamic State extremist group described Wednesday's attack on a museum in Tunisia. Claiming responsibility in an audio recording posted on Twitter, the terror group praised the 2 attackers killed in the mission, calling them Knights of the Islamic State. The group, however, offered no proof that it was behind the attack. In their ongoing investigations, police have made 9 arrests. 4 suspects are said to be directly linked to the gunmen. The remaining 5 are alleged to be part of a terrorist cell. Officials say the terrorists chose Bardo Museum as its proud symbol of Tunisia's historical identity.
They chose Bardo Museum, and this is not a coincidence. Bardo Museum is a place of memory, and they hate these memories. Bardo Museum is a place for history, and they hate history.
The overall death toll rose to 25 on Thursday, including 20 foreign tourists from several nations, a police officer, and the 2 gunmen who were shot dead by security forces. Nearly 50 others were hurt. But Tunisia's security services have been praised for their quick response, as the gunmen had explosives which they failed to detonate.
Surveillance will be intensified on all tourist zones in the country to avoid any other incidents like the one yesterday. It will involve all the national territory.
The attack is the deadliest to have hit Tunisia in more than a decade. The country is concerned about the impact this attack could have on its young democracy and its tourism industry, of which its economy is heavily dependent. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
The U.S. is reassessing its Middle East peace approach and, by extension, its relationship with Israel. That's the message President Barack Obama had for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a congratulatory phone call made 2 days after Netanyahu was re-elected to a 4th term. Now, the tone was consistent with comments made earlier by White House spokesman Josh Earnest, who indicated it would reevaluate its historical support of Israel at the UN. That was in light of controversial comments the Israeli leader had made in the final hours of his campaign that a Palestinian state would not exist under his watch. Following his election victory, the prime minister appeared in a TV interview in the U.S. to say he still wanted a 2-state solution, but that the circumstances needed to change in the interest of Israel's security. Now, we hear many success stories of female leaders breaking the glass ceiling, but even in this day and age, we also still hear a lot about gender discrimination. ARIRANG's Kim Min-ji had a chance to sit down with one leadership expert. Her name is Claudia Chan. Take a look.
Women worldwide are making strides to break down walls and create social equality, change, and a more positive environment for women. Claudia Chan, the CEO of She Global Media, a media and education company, is one of them. She's in Seoul to share her insights and empower young women so they too can make change.
Well, there's absolutely a women's revolution happening right now across the world, I believe. I've seen an unprecedented amount of organizations and activists and businesses who have been speaking up for women's rights. Being a woman is incredible, and also it brings a diversity to society. I think feminine traits are incredible qualities of collaboration and communication and empathy and vulnerability that the world needs right now.
So what improvements are needed, to foster an environment, to foster more female leaders?
It can't just be women fighting for women. We need to have the private sector. They need to create programs to get more women into higher level positions. Media is a huge vehicle as well because you have a microphone that speaks to so many women, and to share stories like this, just to create consciousness. Media creates consciousness, and consciousness is what leads to change.
So a recent report by the World Economic Forum showed that Korea ranks 117th out of 142 countries when it comes to gender inequality. So what are some of the things that Korea needs to do in order to reduce this discrepancy and more more women leaders?
We need more initiatives to help young women coming out of college get jobs, because it's very, very difficult, more difficult for a young woman to get a job than it is for a man. That's one, so institutionalizing career programs, sponsorship programs, internship programs at universities, at corporations. That seems like a very important initiative. Number two is, women are not having children. There's a huge fertility issue here in Korea, and of course, then that's not good for society, and it's not good for women. So there needs to be a lot of programs and initiatives around that as well.
Do you have any advice for aspiring young women?
The number one glass ceiling to break before any of it is really the one in your mind. Having that confidence, inner confidence, is really important, and changing the voice in your mind instead of being critical, constantly critical of yourself. We need to be more loving and kind to ourselves so that our voice is giving us the confidence to go out there and to do whatever it is that we want to do, to dream big and to defy the odds.
Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Welcome back. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Today is going to be an unseasonably warm as yesterday, getting up near the 20s in lots of places of the country. But always keep in mind that this applies only during the day, while there are huge temperature drops into the evening hours. Now, we are mostly under partly cloudy skies with a bit of a fog. Now, the clouds will mostly clear out as the day progresses, and though there will still be some lingering fog in the nation. Now, keep an eye on the fine dust index because the levels are pretty high up, and especially here in the capital area, while Gangdo province as well, and that's expected to expand into the surrounding regions. Now, with that in mind, let's have a look at the readings for today. So we'll peak up to 22 this afternoon, while the southern regions such as Gwangju and Busan will top to 18 and 16 degrees. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 16, Dokdo hits to 11 degrees, while Mount Kumgang is cloudy at 9. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's the end of this edition of our newscast. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. We'll be back with more updates at 6 p.m. Korea time.